just going to ask you, first of all, I mean, you were in Downing Street in that period. Parties?
I did not attend any of the parties.
Did you know they were going on at all?
Of course. The house is not that big.
Oh, really? So it was quite clear that...
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the important thing to say is that many individuals working in Downing Street at the time were not involved in attending parties and wanted to abide by the rules that we were helping to set.
I mean, it's a point often overlooked, for example, that garden party, 50% of the people who were invited didn't turn up.
Exactly that. And so the sad thing is many people are being tarnished by the same brush, where in fact there were a lot of people who took their jobs very, very seriously. And in fact, of course, some of the people that were partying did take their jobs seriously, but at the same time, of course, they were engaged in things that were not right.
And how do you think about the way things have rolled out?
In what respect?
Well, do you think it should have been an issue that ended Boris Johnson's premiership and has now led to him being condemned by the Privileges Committee?
Yeah, it's strange because in one respect, I think Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister. He was the captain of the ship and ultimately should be responsible for the things that were happening in Downing Street, whether he knew about them or not. But in another respect, I feel like, he was given a mandate by 14 million people, and those 14 million people did not believe they were voting for a saint. Like they were all very aware that he was a man that was not very perfect. And I feel uneasy about the idea of people who do not have the same type of mandate being able to essentially try to end his career. And actually some of the punishment that they're attempted to dish out, for me, is a bit of an overreach. I mean, how can you say a former Prime Minister should not have a pass to attend meetings in the House of Commons? It just sounds very personal, vindictive and actually wrong.
But in the end, isn't the acid test for any leader in this country, in our democracy, that lying to the House of Commons is just not on?
Yes, but at the same time, Boris Johnson believes, or at least is saying that he doesn't believe that he lied to the House of Commons. And actually, if you look at, again, the punishment, another example, a suspension for 90 days.
Do you really think he believes that he didn't lie?
I've never been in the business of trying to judge people's motives. I'm not saying I'm going to take him at his word, but I'm saying what he said, which is he believes he hasn't lied to the House of Commons. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the things that happened were not okay, and they happened on his watch, and so he is the person that's ultimately responsible. But that doesn't mean that somebody that was given a mandate by 14 million people can just be, in some respects, dismissed by people that may have some personal vendettas to settle.
I'm really interested by this particular idea of an outsider and what you define it as, because some people saw Boris Johnson as an outsider, which is fascinating because he is steeped in all of the traditions of this country, right? Private school, very, very expensive education, quite a wealthy background that lots of people have absolutely no relation to. And yet he somehow managed to make himself feel like an outsider. I mean, A, how do you think, you know him better than any of us do, how do you think he managed that? And B, why do you think it's important in politics?
Yeah, you asked a really good question. So, just to take it back a bit, when I was in Downing Street, there were many reasons why I felt like I was an outsider. I didn't really reflect on it because there was no time when you're in a place like that. But when I left, I had the opportunity to reflect on this book because I didn't go to Oxford, Cambridge, I wasn't part of the Vote Leave set, didn't work in City Hall with Boris, and I wasn't a legacy hire from a previous Prime Minister. So in many respects, I was an outsider in the building. Now, during this investigation of 18 months and reflecting on what it means to be an outsider, I kind of concluded that it means different things to different people from different places for different reasons. But there are three categories. One, a demographic or factual outsider, so when there's an objective fact that differentiates you. Second is a psychological outsider, so people that might look the same in a room, but for some reason maybe you've experienced some kind of trauma or whatever.
Don't you think a lot of people feel like outsiders, imposter syndrome?
Exactly that. But then there's a third type, and that's the type you often see in politics, which is the tactical outsider. So this is when somebody makes themselves different or takes themselves outside in order to achieve some kind of political benefit or end. So Nigel Farage, and anti-establishment outsider, Donald Trump, and of course in many respects Boris Johnson, and hence the title of the book, The Power of the Outsiders, because whatever type of outsider you are, there is a value you can derive from using it to your advantage, which of course Boris Johnson did to become the Prime Minister.
Do you think Rishi Sunak uses it? I mean, do you think he is an outsider? Do you think he has that sort of knack? No.
No.
So you
why,
don't.
Why not?
So
You know what? People keep telling me, Sam, you're going to get cancelled by the Conservative Party if you keep on being so honest. Look, Boris Johnson has obviously a relatively privileged background, but he's decided to find a way to differentiate himself in a crowded space of people who are very similar. I don't think Rishi Sunak has done the same. I think Rishi Sunak he went to Winchester College.
But even on the basis of being the son of immigrants,
no, it doesn't,
and being the first Asian Prime Minister, that doesn't make him an outsider.
No, when I was in Downing Street, I always tell people the one thing that I didn't feel like is that I was excluded because of the colour of my skin. And that's because when you get into certain corridors of power, bluntly, your class is what matters. All right, you can be an old Etonian that is from an African Caribbean background and feel just as comfortable as somebody who is a descendant of landowners. So the class is the missing piece of the puzzle when it comes to how we're going to get true equality. One of the reasons why I didn't become the Conservative mayoral candidate over the last week is because I'm different. People said to me, Samuel, you don't sound like a politician. Or Samuel, you didn't attend all the dinners that some of your competitors have been attending. And it's not that I wouldn't have gone to those dinners. I like good food. But I wasn't part of these networks that folks who are part of the establishment engage and are part of. And
there's been a bit of a controversy about that, hasn't there? About the London mayoral election.
Yeah. Look, I had the most senior backers, 2 former chairmen, former Home Secretary, former Chancellor. I had the most endorsements, reached 100 before anybody else. In fact, nobody's reached 100 yet. I had the most coverage in the media. The list goes on about why I was at least qualified to have my opportunity to be heard.
So what do you think happened?
Well, they didn't put me on the long list. And some of the reasons why I was told I wasn't on the long list was because I didn't attend some of the dinners with the board. There was also some controversy around who was going to run my campaign. So one of the people that was in the room who was part of the board said to me, Samuel, the only way you're going to get on this long list is if Ben Mallet runs your campaign. And because every single candidate has to agree for him to run your campaign. And, he ran Sean Bailey's campaign and he's a nice guy. I know him personally. But I said, well, I'm not going to agree to that. And so essentially, I had a choice. Demonstrate that you're willing to bend to the establishment or, fight.
Can I ask principles. You whether you decided not to allow him to run your campaign because he is one of the people who has been pictured in the lockdown rule-breaking video that's out today?
It wasn't the only factor, but it was a significant factor because I was working in Downing Street. I made sure that I tried my best to live by the rules that we set. And that was very important to me. And so, for many reasons when I left, it was something that was stuck in my mind. And then to say, well, you did what you did in Downing Street, you ran the vaccine deployment with Nadeem Zahawi, and then one of the people who were prominently implicated in this thing is going to lead your campaign was just not something I was comfortable with. I don't know if I would have gotten to a point when I was comfortable, but certainly when the question was asked of me, the answer was, well, I'm not going to agree to this right now.
Is that why you left? Because you just end up feeling uncomfortable, not just an outsider, but uncomfortable.
Well, look, in politics, it's very wise for you to try and be one step ahead, and that is the secret sauce, right? If you're able to see where things are going, and you can, make sure you're able to not necessarily crumble when things are going to head in the wrong direction. And so, I could see where things were heading. I could see where we probably would be in 18 months' time, and maybe even beyond, to be honest. Yeah. And I just didn't want to be part of it.
Well, let's talk about where you're heading. The ability to know exactly what comes next. What does come next?
Well, I'm very passionate about housing. It's my passion for housing may aid in my cancellation within the Conservative movement, if I'm being completely honest with you. But look, I'm 35 years old. I own my own home, but I was very lucky and I had to leave London. And then the value of my property went up and then allowed me to buy another house, etc., etc. But so many Londoners, young Londoners, who've done everything that politicians told them to do, gone and got themselves qualifications, gone and got themselves some good jobs, find themselves trapped in this spiral of high rents, not being able to afford to purchase their own home or to live where they grew up. And
you said cancellation within the Conservative Party.
Of course.
So you don't see a future as a Conservative.
Well, I'm going to keep talking the truth because I think that the thing
as a Conservative.
Yeah, I'm not going to leave the party, but certainly, the people have said, well, Sam, if you keep speaking up, you're not going to be in the candidates list, or you're not going to get a safe seat, or they're not going to let you run for mayor next time. But I think I'm on the right side of history because there are some subjects that we as Conservatives need to start taking very seriously, and we need to start not just thinking about folks who might be our core voters, but also people who are going to be our future voters, and also people who might never vote for us but pay their taxes, and we're supposed to be on their side too.
Sounds like you think there's a bit of a lack of bravery in the current Conservative Party.
100%.